A $10,000 fine for a rotting cabin saved my life and destroyed an entire HOA empire. Rebecca Blackwood marched onto my property with her clipboard and power suit, waving bylaw 17.3.2 like a weapon, demanding I demolish my grandfather's 100-year-old cabin within 30 days. What she didn't know was that this cabin held secrets worth more than her entire HOA could imagine, and I had connections she never saw coming. The cease and desist letter I got signed wasn't just any legal document, it came from the highest office in the state. Where are you watching from? Comment below. I bet your area has HOA horror stories too, but none ended like this. Thomas Henderson, my 62-year-old neighbor and former Army Ranger, walked by and let out an appreciative whistle. Beautiful work there, Morrison. Reminds me of the outposts we built in Kandahar, simple but solid as a rock. I invited him in for coffee, maintaining my 8:30 morning ritual even out here in the wilderness. Thanks, Tom. Want some coffee? He accepted with a knowing smile about my habits. 8:30 on the dot, eh? Some habits die hard, I suppose. As I poured 2 cups, Tom's expression grew serious. Daniel, about the HOA situation, you did get permission for this build, right? I frowned at the question. HOA? This land has been in my family since 1952, Tom. We have a special covenant from when my grandfather saved the governor's son during the war. The HOA can't touch this property. Tom shook his head slowly, and I could see concern etching lines on his weathered face. 3 years ago, Rebecca Blackwood expanded the HOA's jurisdiction. She's forced out 8 families in that time. Same pattern every time. She hits them with fines until they go bankrupt and have to sell. My auditor instincts immediately kicked in at the mention of a pattern. Pattern? Tell me more about these 8 families, Tom. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if Rebecca might be listening. Every single one was on a strategic corner lot, or had prime real estate value. The Jeffersons, the Garcias, the Coopers, all gone now. And guess what? Every property was bought by different companies, but something always felt off about it. 2 days later, at exactly 8:28 in the morning, I was pondering Tom's words about patterns when I heard the distinctive purr of a Mercedes engine. Through my cabin window, I watched a black S-Class pull up, license plate reading CLTRFAK. Rebecca Blackwood stepped out, and she looked exactly like her reputation suggested. Power suit in crimson red, designer handbag that probably cost more than I spent on my entire cabin, and blonde hair styled so perfectly it looked like a golden helmet. Mr. Morrison? Her voice was as cold as an Excel formula, cutting through the morning air like a blade. I opened the door, trying to keep things professional despite my instant dislike. Mrs. Blackwood, would you like some coffee? It's exactly 8:30. She wrinkled her nose as if I'd offered her poison. I don't consume caffeine after 7 in the morning. It disrupts my carefully maintained schedule. She pulled out a clipboard with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. I'm here to deliver your violation notice. Bylaw 17.3.2, subsections C through Q. I took the paper and read through it, my trained eye automatically flagging the inconsistencies and absurdities. Violation C stated that natural wood tone falls outside approved pallet number 2019-B. Violation G cited the absence of a 2-car garage per structural mandate. Violation M claimed my window ratio deviated from the 3:5 golden standard. And Violation Q, perhaps the most ridiculous, noted my lack of an Internet of Things enabled entry system. These bylaws are from 2019 for suburban houses, I pointed out, trying to keep my voice steady. They don't apply to rural cabins built on land with special covenants. All structures within Pine Valley fall under HOA jurisdiction, Rebecca cut me off, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You have 30 days to demolish this eyesore. Additionally, you're fined $500 for unauthorized construction. I felt my jaw clench. I have a covenant from 1952 that explicitly states... She interrupted again, a small smirk playing at her lips. That covenant expired when the HOA expansion vote passed 3 years ago. Your absence from the vote equals consent to the new terms. That's how democracy works, Mr. Morrison. She turned to leave but paused at her car door. Oh, Morrison? I see you're ex-PricewaterhouseCoopers. I do hope your audit skills don't make you difficult. We have ways of dealing with difficult people. As she said this, something else slipped out. Besides, this land should have never been... Never mind. She caught herself, but I filed that slip away in my mind. There was more to this than just an overzealous HOA president. That evening, I transformed my cabin into what looked like a scene from a detective movie. Laptop open, whiteboard covered in sticky notes, I went into full auditor mode, mapping out the 8 families Tom had mentioned. The Jeffersons on Maple Corner had been fined $15,000 over 6 months before selling at 40% below market value. The Garcias on the hill with the strategic view got hit with grass violation fines until they declared bankruptcy. The Coopers, a sweet retired couple, were forced out because their beige paint was supposedly the wrong shade of beige. Aha, I muttered as I drew lines connecting the dots on my makeshift investigation board. A pattern was definitely emerging, and it looked like all these properties would form a perfect development corridor if connected. Going deeper into property records, I found the buyers. Mountain Holdings LLC bought the Jefferson lot, Pine Investments LLC took the Garcia land, Valley Properties LLC acquired the Cooper house. Shell companies, I said to myself, but then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Every single LLC had the same registered agent. WLW Legal Services. William Webb, Rebecca's ex-husband's law firm. I created a new spreadsheet, tracking the money flow from the sales to the LLC accounts, all transferred within 30 days to accounts in the Cayman Islands. $1.6 million just from Pine Valley, following the classic money laundering pattern I'd seen too many times at PricewaterhouseCoopers. This reminded me of the Techron Industries case, the one that finally made me quit, but this was on a whole different level. My laptop chimed with an email notification from HOA violations at pinevalley.org. Expecting more fines, I opened it, but my screen filled with my personal PricewaterhouseCoopers records, therapy session notes, and worst of all, my father's suicide report from 5 years ago. The message read, "We have everything, Morrison. The Tetron cover-up, your father's weakness, your therapy sessions about survivor's guilt. Leave voluntarily, or Pine Valley learns why you really quit your job." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't just some power-tripping HOA president. Someone had hacked into classified medical and corporate records. My phone rang, Tom's name flashing on the screen. "Daniel, Rebecca just met with some strange men at the old warehouse on Route 6. Black SUVs, expensive suits, definitely not locals. I've seen this kind of thing before in Afghanistan, and it never means anything good." 4 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep, my father's suicide replaying in my mind like a broken record. If only I'd seen the signs, I whispered to my 4th cup of coffee, remembering how the financial pressure had finally broken him. But I couldn't dwell on the past, not when someone was using his death as a weapon against me. Screw this, I decided, pulling out my phone. Time to use what I know best. I called Lisa Brown, my old friend from law school who'd stayed in Denver while I'd gone corporate. "I need legal help, and I need it urgently," I said when she picked up on the 3rd ring. Her office in downtown Denver hadn't changed much since I'd last visited 2 years ago. All modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Lisa welcomed me warmly, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Daniel, I heard about your cabin project. Good for you for getting out of the corporate grind. God, you look terrible though. When's the last time you slept?" I hesitated for a moment, old feelings stirring, then I quickly pushed down. "Lisa, I need professional help only. This isn't a social call." The disappointment flashed across her face for just a second before her lawyer mask slipped on. "Of course. What's wrong?" I told her everything about the blackmail, watching her face pale as I showed her the email. "This is criminal. We need to go to the police immediately." But I shook my head. "No, first I need to map the entire network. Remember Forensic Accounting 401? Professor Williams always said to follow the money before you make your move." I pulled out my laptop and showed her the pattern of the 8 families, the LLC connections, and the money trail I'd traced. MW Legal Services. That's William Webb, isn't it? Rebecca's ex-husband? Lisa caught on quickly, her legal mind already racing ahead. All the LLCs use the same legal services, and the funds route through 7 shell companies before hitting the Cayman accounts. I ran the calculations again. But the volume suggests much bigger players than just a vindictive HOA president and her ex-husband. We're looking at organized crime levels of money here. My phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Morrison? This is Bradley Stevens. I'm the deputy on the HOA board. I need to talk to you privately. It's urgent." We met at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of Denver, and Bradley looked like he hadn't slept in days. He kept glancing around nervously as he fidgeted with his coffee cup. "My wife Emily is pregnant, we've got medical bills piling up, and I never wanted this job, but I didn't have a choice." His hands shook as he slid a USB drive across the table. "Rebecca makes me document everything, real or fabricated violations." But I kept copies of everything as insurance because I knew eventually this would all come crashing down. I plugged the USB into my laptop, and the files that opened made my jaw drop. There were audio recordings, emails, doctored photos, everything. An audio file started playing automatically, Rebecca's voice filling my earbuds. Morrison has that 1952 covenant, but I don't care. Find violations, a male voice responded. There aren't any real ones. Rebecca's voice turned ice cold. Then create them. Bylaw 17.3.2 is flexible enough to justify anything if you word it right. But worse than the audio were the email threads with someone identified only as VR in the system. The messages were brief but chilling. VR wrote, "Morrison property critical for phase 2, cannot delay past second quarter." Rebecca had responded, "He's an ex-auditor, dangerous because he sees patterns others miss." VR's reply made my blood run cold. "Then escalate immediately. The old man's land must be cleared by June." There was an attached file labeled Project Homestead 1952 Geological Survey that was password protected. "Who is VR?" I asked Bradley, who was now sweating despite the air conditioning. "Vincent something. I only heard the name once. Could be Russian? Maybe Italian?" Rebecca mentioned him once when she didn't know I was listening. Scary guy from what I gathered, not someone you want to cross. When I returned to my cabin that afternoon, I found my sanctuary violated. All 4 tires on my truck were slashed, the windows of the cabin had been smashed with rocks, and red spray paint across the front door read, "Leave or burn." Tom came running over with his rifle, still in full military mode. "I saw everything. 3 men in ski masks drove off in a black van. I've already called the cops and—" I stopped him with a raised hand. "Don't call the cops yet, Tom. This is bigger than local law enforcement can handle." I showed him what I'd found on the USB, watching his expression darken with each revelation. "This is organized crime, Tom. Remember in Kandahar when the local police were compromised? Same playbook here." Tom's jaw tightened. "Then you need backup. Real backup. I've still got contacts from my ranger days." My phone rang. Lisa's panicked voice bursting through the speaker. "Daniel, my firm just got threatened. They said if I represent you, they'll pull all Pine Valley contracts. That's 40% of our revenue." I felt guilty for dragging her into this. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. I never meant to." She cut me off with a string of profanity that would make a sailor blush. "Screw them and screw the firm. I'm driving to your cabin right now. We're ending this corruption once and for all." That midnight, we held a strategy session in my damaged cabin. Daniel, Lisa, and Tom sat around my Kit Brown table covered in documents and laptops. I summarized what we knew so far. We have evidence of money laundering through HOAs, conspiracy against residents, and this unknown VR figure connected to something called Project Homestead. Tom's phone buzzed with a message from one of his military contacts. "Vincent Russo," he read aloud. "Connected to the Italian mob, specializes in property acquisition through intimidation. This guy is bad news, Daniel. Really bad news." I laughed darkly at the situation. From HOA to mafia in 1 week. That's got to be some kind of record. Lisa suddenly brightened with an idea. "Professor Williams. Remember him from law school? He's now chief of staff for Governor Torres, and the governor hates corruption with a burning passion." Bradley called again, his voice frantic and barely coherent. "Emergency board meeting happening right now. I'm hiding outside listening. They're filing criminal charges against you." My stomach dropped. What charges could they possibly fabricate? Bradley's next words made my blood run cold. "Embezzlement from PricewaterhouseCoopers. They have fake evidence saying you stole client funds. Your old boss David Brown is testifying for them." "That's impossible. My record is spotless." Bradley interrupted me, practically hyperventilating. "Brown is working for them. I heard a name I've never heard before. Citadel Group." Rebecca let it slip and then went white as a sheet when she realized I was nearby. The pieces started clicking into place in my mind. Citadel Group, Vincent Russo, Project Homestead, and now my former boss at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Lisa was already searching on her laptop. 1952 Geological Survey. "Oh my God, Daniel, look at this." She turned her screen toward us, showing an old newspaper scan. "Local war hero Morrison keeps gold discovery secret, protects Valley from mining corporation takeover." Tom let out a low whistle. "Gold. There's gold under your cabin?" I stared at the screen, my mind reeling with the implications. My grandfather had hidden a gold mine for 70 years, and now I understood why. I'm literally sitting on a gold mine, I said slowly, but why hide it? Why go through all this elaborate covenant business? I looked at my friends, seeing my own realization mirrored in their faces. There's more to this story, I said, much more than we ever imagined. The doorbell rang at an unexpected hour, and when I opened it, Susan Webb stood there with cardboard boxes stacked in her arms, her eyes red from crying. "Mr. Morrison, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. I invited her in, noticing how she kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to follow. "I'm done with all of this," she declared, setting the boxes on my Kit Brown table with a decisive thud. "William has been bragging about the Morrison deal to his golf buddies, and then I found out he's been celebrating with Rebecca, in my bed, in my house, that I decorated, where I raised our children." She wiped her eyes angrily. "I'm sorry about your situation," I started to say, but she cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Save your sympathy. Just take these boxes and use them to destroy both of them. They deserve everything that's coming." Inside the boxes was a treasure trove of evidence. Communications between Webb, Rebecca, Russo, and Citadel, financial records, meeting minutes, and most shocking of all, documents signed by someone named Richard Lawson. Project Homestead, Reclaiming Morrison Gold, was written in bold letters across one folder, and my hands shook as I opened it. Lisa gasped as she read over my shoulder. "This is it. This is the full conspiracy, laid out in black and white." Among the papers was an old photograph showing a young soldier being helped by another man in uniform. A handwritten note on the back read, "R.L. Sr., 1951. Morrison saves my life." Something about that photo nagged at me, but I couldn't place it yet. We took everything directly to Professor Williams, who arranged an emergency meeting with Governor Torres at the state capitol. Torres, a former prosecutor with steel gray hair and piercing eyes, reviewed the evidence with growing anger. "This is the RICO case of the century," he said, standing up so forcefully his chair rolled back into the wall. "Citadel has people everywhere, in the FBI, the courts, law firms." I nodded grimly. "That's what the evidence suggests, Governor. They've been using HOAs as a front for massive money laundering and property theft." Torres made his decision immediately. "Then we go public. Emergency town hall meeting tonight. We expose everything and let the people decide. I'll sign a cease and desist order right now, but fair warning, Morrison, Lawson won't go down without a fight." The community center was packed by 7 that evening, with over 200 residents crammed into a space meant for half that number. I sat in the front row with my team, Tom on my right, Lisa on my left, and surprisingly, Brad Stevens had joined us with his pregnant wife, Emily. "I'm done lying and covering for them," Brad declared, his jaw set with determination. "Emily deserves better than a husband who's a coward." Becca sat at the HOA board table trying desperately to maintain her composure and authority, but cracks were showing. Her perfect hair had a few strands out of place, and her hands trembled slightly as she shuffled papers. The absence of William Webb at the board table was like a giant red flag waving in the wind. "Thank you all for coming to this emergency meeting," Rebecca began, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "There have been some recent misunderstandings about HOA operations that I'd like to clarify." Before she could continue, Mr. Jefferson jumped to his feet, his face red with years of suppressed anger. "Misunderstandings? You destroyed my family with your fake violations. $15,000 in fines because my mailbox was the wrong shade of blue." Mrs. Garcia stood up next, tears streaming down her face. "You made us homeless. My children had to change schools because you said our grass was a 1/4 inch too high." The crowd erupted in angry shouts and accusations, years of pent-up frustration boiling over. Rebecca pounded her gavel desperately. "Order! I demand order in this meeting!" But her authority had evaporated like morning mist. I stood up slowly, connecting my laptop to the projector system. "Actually, I think it's time everyone learned the truth about Pine Valley HOA and where their money has really been going." The screen lit up with my presentation, Pine Valley HOA, Follow the Money Trail. The first slide showed side-by-side comparisons of real photos and the doctored versions used for violations. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people recognized their own properties. "That's my house," someone shouted. "That fence was photoshopped in." The second slide detailed the shell companies and money flow with clear, simple graphics. $8.3 million extracted from Pine Valley residents over 3 years. 23 shell companies used to hide the trail. Final destination, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the theft sank in. But I wasn't done yet. The third slide was the audio recording. Rebecca's voice filled the room, ordering Bradley to create fake violations, discussing removing obstacles for Citadel. The crowd's shock turned to fury. "Where's your lawyer, Rebecca?" Lisa asked loudly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Where's William Webb? Why isn't he here defending these actions?" For the first time, real fear flashed across Rebecca's face as she realized how alone she was. Suddenly, the double doors slammed open with explosive force. Vincent Russo strode in with 6 men flanking him, all wearing expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the bulge of weapons underneath. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Evening, folks," Russo said with a cold smile that never reached his eyes. "I heard there's some confusion about property management in this lovely community." The crowd shrank back in terror as Russo's men blocked all the exits. Parents pulled their children close, and I could hear whispered prayers from the elderly couple behind me. "Morrison," Russo said, approaching our table with deliberate slowness, "you've been causing problems for my business associates. That needs to stop. Tonight." I started to speak, but Russo nodded to one of his men, who struck me across the face with brutal efficiency. I tasted blood as Tom started to rise, only to freeze as 3 guns appeared, pointed at his chest. "The truth?" Russo laughed, a sound like ice breaking. "The truth is, you're sitting on something that doesn't belong to you. Your grandfather was nothing but a common thief who stole what rightfully belonged to others." He snapped his fingers and the projector screen changed to his own presentation. Military records from 1951 appeared, along with photos of 2 soldiers in a cave. Lieutenant Richard Lawson Sr. discovered gold during a routine patrol. He trusted your grandfather, told him everything about the massive deposit. And how did Morrison repay that trust? He let Lawson walk into an enemy ambush, then played the hero trying to save him when it was too late. I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. No, my grandfather was a hero. He would never... But doubt crept into my voice. War hero? Russo mocked. Or murderer and thief? The gold rightfully belongs to the Lawson family, and now the son wants to reclaim what was stolen. The crowd was confused, scared, no longer sure who to believe. Rebecca had regained some composure, a small smirk playing at her lips as she watched my reputation crumble. That's when Bradley Stevens suddenly stood up, his face pale but determined. "Enough!" he shouted. "I know the real truth about 1951. Everyone turned to stare as Bradley pulled out a second USB drive from his pocket. My wife Emily's grandmother worked at the military hospital. She kept records that tell a different story. Morrison caught Lawson trying to desert and sell the cave location to the enemy. Morrison gave him a chance to surrender, but Lawson chose to attack. Morrison defended himself and then still tried to save Lawson's life. Russo's face darkened to a dangerous shade. He gave an almost imperceptible nod to one of his men. "No!" Emily screamed as the gunman raised his weapon. The shot rang out like thunder in the enclosed space. Bradley crumpled to the floor as chaos exploded around us. Tom's military training kicked in instantly. He flipped our table to create a barrier, shouting, "Everyone get down now!" I dropped to the floor and crawled to Bradley, pressing my hands against the spreading bloodstain on his shirt while screaming for someone to call 911. The room was pandemonium, people screaming, children crying, bodies pressed against bodies trying to reach the blocked exits. Russo stood calm in the center of the chaos like the eye of a hurricane. "This is what happens when people interfere with business," he announced. "Morrison, you have 24 hours to sign over your land to Citadel. Otherwise, more blood will flow, and next time it won't be just one person." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Russo and his men began their retreat, but not before he looked directly at me over the crowd of terrified residents. "Ask yourself this, Morrison. Are you willing to let your entire town suffer for gold you never even knew existed? How many more need to bleed for your grandfather's secret?" As they left, I held pressure on Bradley's wound while Emily sobbed beside us. His blood was warm on my hands, and all I could think was that this was my fault. My inheritance had brought violence to Pine Valley. The ambulance arrived and rushed Bradley away while Tom checked the perimeter of the building. He returned with grim news that made my blood run cold. "Daniel, Russo's men didn't just leave. They've taken strategic positions around town. Bob at the hardware store says armed men are watching his shop. Martha at the gas station called to say the same thing. Even the school has men posted outside." I understood with horrible clarity what was happening. It's a military occupation tactic. Control the resources, create fear, make resistance impossible. Lisa was on the phone with the governor, her frustration evident. "What do you mean you can't send help? Federal jurisdiction, people have been shot." As it turned out, Agent Brown from the FBI had filed a federal injunction preventing state interference in what he claimed was an ongoing federal investigation. We were on our own. I realized this wasn't just about my land anymore. Citadel was making Pine Valley an example for their other 49 HOA towns. Comply or become a war zone. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Nice show tonight, but you haven't heard the real story yet. Meet me tomorrow, come alone." Richard Lawson, the puppet master, was finally ready to show his face. The abandoned Broadmoor Hotel stood like a grave marker against the morning sky, 40 miles from Pine Valley in the middle of nowhere. Once a luxury destination for the wealthy, it was now a skeleton of broken windows and faded grandeur. I parked my truck and walked through the crumbling entrance, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Richard Lawson waited in what used to be the grand ballroom, looking completely out of place in his perfectly tailored Armani suit amid the decay and dust. At 65, he had silver hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. "Morrison," he said, his cultured voice carrying across the empty space. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. Please sit." He gestured to a dusty chair across from him, and I noticed an old photo album on the table between us. "Bradley Stevens better survive," I said coldly, remaining standing. "Vincent gets enthusiastic sometimes, but he's effective at sending messages." Lawson's tone was conversational, as if we were discussing the weather instead of attempted murder. "What do you want, Lawson?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. He opened the photo album slowly, handling it like a precious relic. "Do you know why my father joined the Army, Morrison? To escape poverty. Our family had nothing, absolutely nothing. The farm was failing, my grandparents were starving, and the Army was his only chance at a better life." He showed me photos of a young soldier, hopeful and smiling, then later ones where that hope had died. "He discovered the gold by pure accident during a patrol. Wrote my mother saying we'd never be hungry again, that he'd found our salvation." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "And then he chose treason," I started, but Lawson exploded to his feet. "Survival," he roared, the first real emotion breaking through his controlled facade. "You think war is about honor and glory? It's about staying alive. My father just wanted to come home to his family." He pulled out more documents, his hands shaking with 70 years of suppressed rage. "Your grandfather promised to split everything 50-50. My father trusted him, gave him all the geological surveys he'd taken from captured enemy documents. And how did Morrison repay that trust?" A new photo appeared, showing a military tribunal. He reported my father as a deserter, kept the gold secret for himself, built his legacy on theft while my family rotted in poverty. I studied the documents carefully, my auditor's eye catching something wrong with the dates and signatures. "This doesn't prove anything conclusive," I began, but Lawson cut me off. "I don't need proof." His composure shattered completely. "I need justice. For 70 years, the Morrison family has enjoyed the life my father should have provided for us. 70 years I've spent building my empire just to reclaim what was stolen." He paused, seeming to realize he'd said too much. Of course, the third party in all this was never revealed. He caught himself and returned to cold control. "Here's my offer, Morrison. Sign over the land. I'll give you $5 million. Enough to disappear and live comfortably anywhere in the world. Just leave Colorado and never come back." I felt sick at his casual discussion of destroying my community. And what happens to Pine Valley? His smile was like a shark's. "It becomes a Citadel development. Casino, resort, luxury condos. The current residents can sell at market value or experience Russo's management style indefinitely." "You're insane if you think—" I started, but he held up a hand. "I'm a son, seeking justice for his murdered father. You have 24 hours to decide, 5 million and a peaceful exit, or watch your town burn to the ground." As I drove back to Pine Valley, my phone rang. Tom's voice was excited. "Daniel, Bradley's stable, thank God. But listen, Emily gave me something else from her grandmother's records." My heart raced. "What kind of records?" Tom's next words changed everything. "Hospital records from 1952. Lawson Sr. didn't die from any ambush. He died in the military hospital 3 days later, from poisoning." I nearly drove off the road. "Poisoning? How is that possible? Tom continued reading. The visitor log shows a lawyer named Charles Beaumont visited him the day before he died. Beaumont was representing the Celestial Mining Company, the same one your grandfather fought to keep out of Pine Valley. My mind raced to connect the dots. So Lawson Sr. wasn't a traitor? He was murdered because he knew about the gold? Tom's voice was grim. That's what it looks like. What if your grandfather was protecting Lawson's family all along by keeping quiet about the real killer? Back at my cabin, Lisa was practically bouncing with excitement. Daniel, I did more research on Charles Beaumont. He disappeared right after 1952, but his family founded a law firm that eventually became... She paused for dramatic effect. Beaumont Webb and Associates, which later became just Webb and Partners. The pieces clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. William Webb's firm, I breathed. His family has known about this for 70 years. Lisa nodded rapidly. The Beaumonts killed Lawson Sr. to steal the gold information, but your grandfather stopped the mining company. The Beaumont family kept the secret, built their law empire, and now William Webb inherited that knowledge. He must have reached out to Richard Lawson to partner up. I felt sick to my stomach. Rebecca wasn't randomly chosen to run the HOA. William placed her there specifically for this plan. My phone buzzed with texts from Susan Webb, marked urgent. William is packing everything. Heard him tell Rebecca on the phone that after Lawson disposes of you tomorrow, they'll get the gold rights as payment for their services. The next text made everyone in the room gasp. Found his hidden safe. Inside was a new geological survey, done with modern equipment. The gold deposit isn't worth $500 million, it's worth $2 billion minimum, possibly $5 billion with the rare earth minerals. It's the largest untapped deposit in North America. Tom whistled low and long. That's worth killing for. That's worth destroying entire communities for. I stood up, decision made. No, this ends tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. My friends looked at me with concern. Daniel, what are you planning? Tom asked carefully. I looked around at these people who had risked everything to help me. Lisa had thrown away her career. Tom had put himself in physical danger. Bradley was lying in a hospital bed because he chose to tell the truth. And I realized something important. My grandfather hadn't hidden the gold for wealth. He'd hidden it to prevent exactly this kind of corruption and violence. I'm going to do something Lawson will never expect, I said, pulling out my phone. I dialed a number from Rebecca's HOA files. Rebecca, it's Daniel Morrison. I know you're scared. I know they're using your daughters against you. If you ever want to see Emma and Sophie again without fear, we need to talk. Tonight. The 24-hour diner glowed like a lighthouse in the darkness, halfway between Pine Valley and Denver, where neither Lawson nor Russo would think to look. Rebecca arrived alone, and I barely recognized her. The perfect HOA president facade had crumbled completely. Her designer suit was wrinkled, her perfect hair hung limp, and her hands shook as she slid into the booth across from me. If Lawson finds out I'm here, she whispered, glancing around nervously. You have 10 minutes before they notice you're gone, I assured her, while Tom watched from a corner booth, pretending to read a newspaper. We've been monitoring their patterns. She wrapped her trembling hands around a coffee cup like it was a lifeline. I didn't know about the killings, about Bradley. I thought it was just property development, just business. I swear, I didn't know it would go this far. Lisa leaned forward aggressively. That's complete bulls. But I cut her off with a gentle hand on her arm. I knew enough. Rebecca suddenly burst out, tears flowing freely. Okay, I knew enough to be scared, knew enough to be ashamed, but I was already in too deep. They have my daughters. Do you understand what that means? Her voice broke completely. Emma's 16, Sophie's 14. They're good girls, honor students. They don't deserve any of this. If I don't cooperate, William will use his court connections to destroy them, plant drugs in their lockers, create false social media accounts, generate evidence of crimes they didn't commit. He'll put them in juvenile detention where his connections can... She couldn't finish the sentence. We can help protect them, I said gently. The governor has resources. Rebecca laughed bitterly. How? How can you protect them when Lawson owns judges, FBI agents, police? Your cease and desist order is worthless. Tomorrow morning, Agent Brown is bringing a federal warrant to seize your land for national security. Something about terrorism funding. All complete fabrication, but with enough manufactured evidence to make it stick. Lisa caught the implication immediately. Federal seizure? But that would bypass all state authority, Rebecca nodded miserably. Lawson gets temporary control during the investigation, which will drag on for years while he extracts the gold. By the time court sort it out, the land will be destroyed and the gold gone. Brown, I said slowly, remembering my former boss who'd tried to pressure me into falsifying reports at PricewaterhouseCoopers. You said judges plural. Which ones exactly? Rebecca hesitated, then pulled out her phone with resignation. I record everything. Started as insurance, but now it feels like evidence of my own damnation. She played a recording, and William's voice filled the small booth, listing corrupted officials like he was reading a grocery list. Judge Hamilton, Peterson, and Wu are all confirmed. Federal appeals locked down tight. Even have understandings with 2 Supreme Court justices if it goes that far. My mind raced. Enough. Rebecca, you want your daughters back? Here's the deal. Testify publicly about everything. Hold nothing back. She shook her head violently. They'll kill me before I speak 2 words. I leaned forward intently. Not if Lawson and William are in federal prison. Real federal prison. Not the corrupted system they've built. Tomorrow night, there's a meeting at Citadel Tower. International buyers for the gold rights. You're supposed to attend as window dressing, right? She nodded slowly. Lawson wants me there to show his control over the situation. You'll go, but you'll be wearing a wire and surrounded by real FBI agents, not Brown's corrupted team. Rebecca's eyes widened with the first spark of hope. There's something else. Lawson is meeting with buyers from Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and who knows where else. He's conducting a bidding war for American resources. They're already discussing $500 million just for access rights, with full extraction rights going for billions more. At 3 a.m, we convened an emergency session at the state capitol. Governor Torres, the Attorney General, and the state police chief listened to Rebecca's full testimony, their faces growing darker with each revelation. Gentlemen and ladies, Torres stood, his voice carrying the authority of his office. What we have here is nothing less than an attempted coup of state sovereignty. Federal agents corrupted, judges bought and paid for, and a crime syndicate attempting to steal billions in state resources. The Attorney General looked worried. But Governor, the federal jurisdiction issues. Torres slammed his hand on the table. To hell with jurisdiction. Colorado will not bow to corruption, even if it wears a federal badge. I'm activating the National Guard under emergency provisions. This is a clear and present danger to state resources and citizen safety. Dawn broke over Pine Valley like a promise of battle. The town transformed overnight into something from a movie. National Guard units took positions around key buildings. Media trucks lined every street, and citizens emerged from their homes in a show of support that brought tears to my eyes. At my cabin, the command center buzzed with activity. Rebecca was under state police protection in a safe house, preparing her testimony and being fitted with recording equipment. Tom coordinated with the guard commander, an old buddy from his service days. Perimeter's secure, Daniel, but if the feds come with a valid warrant, we can only stall, not stop them. I understood the knife's edge we were walking. The governor's buying us time for the legal challenge. The media presence should keep things civil. Lisa worked her phone constantly, fielding calls from reporters. 3 national networks confirmed. CNN, Fox, NBC, they all want exclusive access to the story. I made a strategic decision. Tell them they all have access. The more cameras, the harder it is for Lawson to suppress this. Susan Webb arrived with one final piece of crucial information. She spread geological surveys across my table. The $2 billion was the conservative estimate. Deep core samples suggest possible deposits worth $5 billion or more, plus rare earth minerals essential for technology manufacturing. This isn't just gold, it's a strategic resource that China would kill to control. Tom whistled at the implications. That's enough money to buy small countries. Hell, that's enough to influence elections, change laws, reshape entire regions. The pieces finally clicked completely. That's why the international buyers. Lawson isn't just selling gold, he's selling American strategic resources to the highest bidder. That's actual treason. Professor Williams sounded panicked. Daniel, federal convoy spotted, 20 minutes out, Brown's moving now. At the same moment, a text came through from Rebecca inside Citadel Tower. Buyers arriving now. Heard someone mention $500 million just for first access. This is really happening. Lisa suddenly screamed, staring at her laptop screen. Oh my God, Daniel, I found it. She turned the computer toward us, showing an archived contract from 1952. There's a hidden clause in the original covenant, written in legal language so dense I almost missed it. My heart pounded. What kind of clause? Article 7, Section 3, she read excitedly. If the mineral rights are ever threatened by foreign acquisition or hostile takeover, ownership automatically transfers to the United States Department of Defense, with the Morrison family serving as permanent stewards. Everyone in the room stared in stunned silence. Tom was the first to speak. Your grandfather, that brilliant paranoid bastard, he made sure the gold could never be sold to America's enemies. I could barely breathe. So, Lawson's auction tonight? Lisa grinned like a shark. Completely illegal, and every bidder will be witnessing him commit treason in real time. We've got him, Daniel. We've finally got him. Governor Torres called one last time. Morrison, federal convoy 10 minutes out. You ready for this? I looked around my grandfather's cabin, at the land he'd protected, at the friends willing to fight beside me, at the town standing up to corruption, and at the contract that would bring it all crashing down on Lawson's head. Ready, Governor, let's end this once and for all. 8 o'clock in the morning arrived with federal vehicles surrounding my property. Through my window, I counted 20 federal agents in full tactical gear. Agent David Brown stepped out of the lead vehicle, and I felt my jaw clench at the sight of my former boss from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Morrison, Brown called out, waving a warrant. Federal seizure order. Vacate immediately or face arrest. But between Brown's forces and my cabin stood 50 National Guardsmen. Colonel Martinez stepped forward with military precision. Federal agents do not have jurisdiction on a state emergency scene without proper authorization. Brown's face flushed red. This is a federal matter involving national security. His protest was cut short as Governor Torres appeared, flanked by state troopers. Alleged federal matter, Torres corrected, pulling out paper, which I am formally challenging, and Agent Brown, I have a warrant for your arrest. The color drained from Brown's face. What? The state attorney general stepped forward. David Brown, you are under arrest for conspiracy, accepting bribes, and falsifying federal documents. We have evidence of payments from Citadel Group totaling over $2 million. Brown tried to run, but was quickly tackled. His phone fell, showing an incoming call from R. Lawson. Answer it on speaker, I suggested. Brown was forced to answer, and Lawson's voice boomed out, unaware of his audience. Brown, why aren't you securing the property? The buyers are waiting. Torres smiled coldly. Because Agent Brown is in custody, Mr. Lawson. This is Governor Torres. Silence. Then Lawson spoke with barely controlled rage. Morrison, I should have known. I took the phone. Check the news, Lawson. Your auction isn't going as planned. The split-screen coverage showed our standoff alongside FBI and SWAT teams surrounding Citadel Tower. Inside, Rebecca's wire captured the chaos. Lawson's controlled voice cracked with panic. International buyers scrambled for blocked exits. William Webb could be heard destroying documents. Nobody move, the FBI director's voice boomed. Everyone is under arrest for conspiracy to traffic in stolen government resources. The wire captured Lawson's desperate attempts to maintain control, buyers shouting in multiple languages, briefcases of cash abandoned. Richard Lawson, the FBI director announced, you are under arrest for treason. Back at Pine Valley, Lisa addressed the media with the covenant. Article 7, Section 3 states that should mineral rights be threatened by foreign acquisition, ownership transfers immediately to the Department of Defense with the Morrison family as permanent stewards. Gasps rippled through reporters. I stepped forward. My grandfather protected this gold to ensure it would never corrupt our democracy or be sold to foreign powers. Brown screamed desperately, Lawson owns everyone, judges, senators. Torres smiled grimly. Thanks to Rebecca Blackwood's recordings, we know exactly who Lawson owns. They're all being arrested. The next hours became a cascade of arrests. 3 federal judges, 12 FBI agents, 23 HOA board members across 10 states. William Webb was dragged from his office. Vincent Russo was caught at the airport. Rebecca's testimony, broadcast from protective custody, became the day's most powerful moment. I'm sorry I let them use me against innocent families, but Daniel Morrison showed me that standing up to corruption is the only way to protect those we love. At Citadel Tower, Lawson was being led out when I arrived with state police. You think you've won? Lawson hissed. The network is bigger than you imagine. I studied him. I know about your father, and I'm sorry, but you chose revenge over justice. Justice? Lawson exploded. Where was justice when my father died? A voice interrupted. Right here, waiting for truth to come out. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman being helped from a car. Mrs. Beaumont? Lawson gasped. Charlotte Beaumont, she confirmed. Charles Beaumont's widow. I must speak after 70 years of silence. Her confession, broadcast live, rewrote history. My husband poisoned Richard's father in that hospital. He wanted the gold for the mining company. Morrison tried to stop him and made sure the gold would never fall into corrupt hands. She turned to Lawson with tears. Your father wasn't a traitor. He was murdered for discovering the gold. Morrison protected you from that truth. He saved you as a baby when my husband would have killed you too. Lawson's legs gave out. No, impossible. My whole life. Charlotte handed me an envelope. Morrison left this for his grandson when truth came out. I read my grandfather's words. The man I saved had a son who grew up hating me for a lie. I couldn't tell him the truth without destroying him. I kept the gold hidden to prevent greed from corrupting more lives. The real treasure was protecting others, even from truths that would destroy them. Guard the land, guard the truth, and remember that integrity is the only gold that matters. Lawson was led away, broken, mumbling. All for nothing. 70 years for... Charlotte handed me another envelope. Your grandfather said only open this if Lawson survived learning the truth. Inside was a single line. The gold was bait. The real treasure is what Lawson's father actually found. J.M. My blood ran cold. What do you mean the gold was bait? Charlotte smiled sadly. You didn't think $5 billion in gold was the real secret, did you? Your grandfather was far too clever for that. 1 month after the explosive events that transformed Pine Valley from a quiet mountain community into the center of a national scandal, the changes were visible everywhere. The HOA had been completely disbanded and replaced with an elected council actually representing residents' interests. Tom Henderson, the war hero who'd stood by me through everything, had been elected mayor by a landslide. Bradley Stevens, recovered from his gunshot wound, now headed financial oversight for the town, with a determination to never let corruption take root again. Lisa had opened her own law firm, specializing in helping HOA abuse victims, with a waiting list of clients stretching across the country. The federal investigation had revealed the true scope of Citadel's corruption. 50 HOAs across 10 states had been fronts for money laundering and property theft. $3.2 billion had been stolen from homeowners over 20 years, with 847 families wrongfully displaced. The numbers were staggering, but each represented real people whose lives had been destroyed by greed. Governor Torres visited my cabin on a crisp autumn morning, bringing news about the gold's future. The Defense Department has agreed to a unique arrangement, he explained, accepting a cup of coffee at exactly 8:30, a habit he'd picked up from our meetings. The gold will be carefully extracted using environmentally responsible methods, with all profits going to education and healthcare for Colorado residents. But the land itself remains under the Morrison Foundation's protection, with you as chairman. I smiled at the irony. So, I'm guardian of a gold mine I never wanted. Torres chuckled. Your grandfather would be proud. He turned a curse into a blessing for thousands of people. The Morrison Foundation, established with bipartisan support, would ensure the gold benefited the public good rather than private greed. It felt like the perfect honor to my grandfather's legacy. A letter arrived from Rebecca Blackwood, writing from minimum security prison where she was serving a reduced sentence for her cooperation. Daniel, my daughters visited yesterday. It was the first time I've seen them smile in 5 years. Thank you for showing me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. I'll spend whatever time I have left earning the forgiveness of those I hurt. Rebecca. Even she deserved a second chance, I thought, carefully filing the letter with the others from people whose lives had been touched by these events. The documentary crew that arrived 6 months later found me reluctant to relive the drama, but I'd agreed because the story needed to be told. So, Mr. Morrison, the interviewer asked, setting up in front of my cabin, were you ever tempted by the $5 billion literally under your feet? I laughed, petting Rex, the German shepherd who'd become famous for his role in protecting me. My grandfather left me something worth more than gold. He left me a purpose, a responsibility to protect what matters. The camera captured Tom arriving with his famous barbecue, Lisa with case files for her latest victory against a corrupt HOA. Bradley and Emily with their new baby named James after my grandfather. Community, I continued, gesturing to my friends. That's the real treasure. You can't put a price on people who'll stand with you against corruption. The documentary would go on to win several awards, but what mattered more were the legislative changes it inspired. The Morrison Act, passed with overwhelming support, established new protections for homeowners against HOA abuse nationwide. It required transparency in all HOA operations, limited fine amounts, and created an independent review board for disputes, 100,000 families across America were protected by legislation born from our small town's fight. The final statistics from the investigation were sobering. Richard Lawson received life without parole for treason, conspiracy, and racketeering. His empire, built on 7 decades of planning, had crumbled in a single day. Rebecca served 2 years before being released to become an advocate for HOA reform, speaking at conferences about how corruption takes root in small authority. William Webb got 25 years and was disbarred. His family's century-old law firm dissolved in disgrace. Vincent Russo received 40 years, ending his reign of terror permanently. The Morrison Foundation's first year saw remarkable success. $500 million in gold was carefully extracted and converted to funding for 3 new hospitals, 50 schools, and countless scholarships for Colorado students. The land itself remained pristine, with only a small section used for extraction under strict environmental guidelines. My grandfather's dream of the land benefiting everyone had finally come true. As the documentary crew packed up their equipment, they asked for one final shot. I stood in front of my cabin, the simple wooden structure that had started everything, with the mountains rising majestically behind. The wooden sign my grandfather had carved still hung by the door. J. Morrison Homestead, 1952. Integrity is the only gold that mattered. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the peaceful valley that had been saved from corruption. My voice provided the final narration. Sometimes protecting something small requires standing up to enormous power. But when good people unite against corruption, even empires can fall. My grandfather knew that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the communities we protect and the values we uphold. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting them gold, I went inside my cabin. On the mantel sat the photo of my grandfather, the contract that had saved everything, and a small wooden box. Inside that box was the map to the second location mentioned in his final letter, still unopened. Some secrets were worth keeping for the next generation to discover when their time came. Rex barked at something in the woods, probably just a deer, and I smiled. Peace had finally returned to Pine Valley, hard-won but genuine. The gold beneath my feet would help thousands, but the real treasure was the knowledge that one person standing up for what's right can indeed change everything. My grandfather had known that truth, and now, so did I. The revolution he'd started with a simple covenant had come full circle, protecting not just land but the very idea that integrity matters more than money. And that, I thought as I closed the door on another quiet evening, was worth more than all the gold in Colorado.
What did we learn today? Probably nothing, but it was fun, wasn't it? Show some love with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to BD Stories.